Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the council, thanks for the opportunity to come up and the invitation, Mr. McCarthy, Councilor McCarthy, give you a little update. And before I do that, just as you did at the moment of silence, our minds and hearts are with those that were greatly affected. We thank God we had no loss of life or major injuries due to the event. However, there's a lot of distress in a lot of homes down, and particularly in Ward 1 as we speak. I also want to express some words of gratitude. Governor Baker, Lieutenant Governor Polito were on the phone constantly with me. Congressman Lynch on the phone constantly with me. The governor directing National Guard help down here, directing the MBTA for their buses for heaters down here. The state agencies, DCR, MWRA, MassDOT, all of them we're in touch with and working together with. I know Councilor Palmucci remembers the years ago on Albrecht Road. And since that time, this body has supported some appropriations, and we've made some great incremental improvements in that. In addition to that, we instituted new protocols in preparation, working with MassDOT, the town of Milton, redirecting some of the drainage systems in West Quincy, so we didn't lose those areas that traditionally we may have lost. So that's a positive thing. Brewster Ambulance, the Salvation Army, American Red Cross, there were folks that volunteers that just stepped up at the shelters to help out, providing leadership. Certainly my colleagues in government, I know I communicated with most of you, if not all of you, either by text or by phone at one point or another. Fire Chief Barron, Police Chief Keenan, Commissioner Grazioso, City Engineer Paul Costello, Public Buildings Commissioner Paul Hines, Inspection Services Jay Duca, the Superintendent of Schools, and all of their teams and all their staffs. Everybody just stepped up to assist in that weekend. And so I'm just breaking this down in 3 quick categories. We'll talk a little bit about preparations. With the predictions as they were, we went into preparation mode earlier in the week, and some of that includes, obviously, several meetings with the key departments and preparing for what could be the worst, such as the fire department and the chief assigning a ladder truck out to Houseneck, a ladder truck out to Squantum, an engine directly out to Marina Bay. We essentially had additional ambulances at all the peninsulas, additional DPW equipment at all the peninsulas to assist in what could happen if there was peninsulas were cut off, and we certainly saw that they were cut off for periods of time, Houseneck being the longest time. The police with their manpower and the Marine unit, and with the rescues with the National Guard, the fire, and the police guys in the wetsuit getting people out of their homes, was due to the preparation, the things we laid out ahead of time. DPW, full mode, adjusting tie gates and checking storm drains, making sure pump stations were operating. Park and Forestry, obviously preparing crews, and outside vendors assist us with tree and limbs. The Public Buildings Department, as you know, we went through a difficult period just a few weeks back in January, where Broadmeadows and the Kennedy Center took some pretty big hits. And the Public Buildings Department did an incredible job protecting those new boilers and assets that we've replaced just recently. And some of those, going to need some long-term fixes, but everybody was in full mode in preparation to protect those. Again, the ambulance company was incredible. School department, we had custodians cooking burgers at Athens Howe at one point. Everybody just kind of certainly stepped up and did what they could do. Execution, I mean, you saw some of the stats. We evacuated about 500 people. 100 of them were emergency evacuations directly from homes, and that was through the assistance of DPW loaders, National Guard vehicles, and again, the police and fire working together. At that point, I brought to the drier end of C Street where MBTA buses awaited them. They could get in where they were heated, and then people assisted them either getting to a shelter or they were connecting with family members that were picking them up by Adams Shore Library. Continual monitoring of the situation, the tie gates, the pump station operations, and it led to what we saw was, again, in preparation, was a major cleanup. Sunday, DPW, Al's crew did an incredible job. We had 60 pieces of equipment, and we just attacked it, cleaned up the debris all across the city, and then assisted the DCR opening up Quincy Shore Drive, because as you all saw, we had great gridlock across the city with losing one of our 3 north-south major thoroughfares in the city. So, again, good preparation, good execution. Rubbish collection started today. We've indicated to folks in those hit areas we're going to collect rubbish every day this week. We'll reassess it at the end of the week. We've asked people not to include gas cans or paint cans. We're looking at an additional hazmat day in the spring, so we can help handle some of those situations, as well as construction debris. As people continue to move forward and start the construction activity, we're not in a position to pick up major construction debris. That should be handled by those contractors. We had the Inspection Services Department out, and we've indicated publicly that all permit fees will be waived through the building department for these people that were hit. You know, Jay Duker and his team were out assessing structures, making decisions on whether they were habitable or not, assisting people. In some cases, we had to wait to re-energize certain houses until inspectors looked at it to make sure it was safe. In fact, there was a story in Norwell, they were re-energizing and it caused some house fires. So you got to be real careful with every step along the way. We had a meeting today in my office with the DPW folks, Al and Paul, and our outside engineers. I can't say enough about Joe Shea, Woodard and Curran, and David Murphy, and Ty and Bond. We talked to them last week, and we wanted them involved in the entire weekend so they could see every aspect of what was happening while it was happening. In addition, we set up engineering teams to go out at low tide Sunday morning, and we began the assessment, which is the third part of my comments here. And the assessment included seawalls, roads, sidewalks, tie gates, pump stations, and we've got some challenges coming forward. I talked to the council president today, asking for a special council meeting next Monday night to deal with some emergency appropriations, to deal with some of the short-term work we need to do. And I'll give you some examples here. First, look at the seawalls, and both of these engineering companies have a baseline for these seawalls because we've studied the seawalls. We're under design right now for a section of Adams Shore into House Neck. The seawall damage today, just to put it back to where it was, is about $5.5 million. The roads that we've looked at, now some of them are worse than others. Rhoda Street, part of C Street, Post Island, and just part of Dorchester Street were the worst. They'll have to be rebuilt. Roads, we're looking at about $1.4 million. The sidewalks, the shoulders of in some cases, roads without the curb, and then guardrails, again, these are estimates about $800,000. And then we had pump station and some tide gate issues. Pump station down at the Strand and off of Sachem Street, that area behind the clam box. We had some major issues with the generator there. Between that and the tide gates, both at Bayswater and Post Island, is about another $300,000. So at this point, we're looking at about $8 million worth of damage to public infrastructure. Now, as we continue to assess and go out there, that number may go up. You know, sewer lines, drain lines, those take longer to look at and assess because you need to TV line them. We haven't experienced any backups at this point, but we're cleaning the storm drains, and those areas that we're closest hit, we are going to TV, such as the Post Island area. That will tell us what kind of condition the sewer line is in. Now, everyone says, well, that's well below the ground, but when the road moves and the earth moves, there's a potential for the pipes being problematic, whether they crack or whether they completely sever. So we'll continue to do the assessment, but that's the numbers that we have today. We've been in touch with MEMA. We had a meeting with the governor and Representative MEMA and all our department managers yesterday, along with the tour that the governor looked around to see firsthand some of the damage. And so our teams, the Public Works, is going to coordinate with our outside engineering firms all of the information from all the departments as we submit. There's the early submittal, then there'll be a late submittal. Those assessments and numbers help both the governor and the federal government make a decision if we've met the threshold. The federal government designates these areas by county. So I would suggest that the damage done in Quincy will probably be enough to designate Norfolk County. We have Weymouth, we have Braintree, and others that have had damage anyway. So I don't think that's a concern. But, you know, we get into some severe bureaucracy when you start dealing at those levels in FEMA. So we are planning a meeting this Saturday at the Atherton House School at 1 o'clock for all those folks that have been affected. And I know the vast majority was Ward 1, but we had some people down in the Strand area that were affected as well. So it's not done, it's down there because that's where most of the damage was done, but we're going to welcome people to come to that meeting. We'll have more information from our inspection services about how to proceed. We'll have more information from our Public Works Department on the plan on affecting some of the roads and so forth. And so any and all questions we'll be dealing with at that time. We also had a meeting today, Tom Fabrizio and Norm Grenier from Neighborhood Housing and our Planning Department folks to talk about potentially using a portion of the Affordable Housing Trust money to help these people in their transition to get back in their homes permanently. So that's an ongoing. We'll have more to say later in the week on that. I do plan on being in Housing Act tomorrow with a number of my department heads, and we'll be walking those streets to look at things again firsthand, talk to folks, see where they're at, and help them and assist them through the process going forward. So I also have a meeting tomorrow with all our managers that work throughout this, through the Emergency Operations Center, and we're going to meet and we're going to say, okay, what did we do well, what did we do not so well, and how do we improve going forward? And I'm going to tell you, one of the additional budget items that's going to be in the new fiscal year is a Director of Emergency Management. I think that it's time we get back to that so that person can really delve into the details and prepare the shelters, and fire and police do an outstanding job on rescue and safety. But I think we need, and it's become a expertise today, emergency management. And I think we need that at this point. It's been a rough winter with these two storms, and I don't think it's going to get any easier going forward. So I think that will be helpful. So we'll regroup tomorrow and go over all of those items and look for ways to improve, and we'll institute those recommended improvements going forward. As you may know, and as we talked a little bit about Walwick Road, Dave, you've been in Ward 1 a long time. No two storms are the same. You know, talking to DCR, that was the first time the planks were ever blown through the seawalls. It never happened to them before, the way the wind direction was going. So blizzard of '78 had a different effect. The January storm had a very different effect. But the reality is the ocean's getting angrier, and the sea level is rising. We have to deal with that. And we're going to have to make some tough decisions as a community. We're going through the design process now of that seawall. So how much higher do we raise it? Do we spend $5.5 billion on temporary repairs, or do we look at a $15 million rebuilding of the whole seawall on those sections? It'll get higher as you look at all the other seawalls. Those are the kind of decisions and discussions we're going to have as public officials. There's going to be folks that may not like us rising the seawalls too high because it may affect some views. But the reality is we get a sea level issue that communities in this Boston region are dealing with, and we're right in the sweet spot with the elevations of our peninsula. So we'll have, I'm sure, several meetings going forward to discuss some of those policy issues. We'll have those discussions with the state, DEP and Coastal Zone, and the federal government, the EPA. Everyone's talking about coastal resiliency, but the minute you talk about making improvements, the permitting process gets to be a nightmare at those levels. So, you know, Congressman Lynch is working to set up a meeting with the EPA, along with representatives from Senator Markey and Senator Warren's office, to walk through some of these issues in preparation. The governor and the state have already said that they're waiving certain permit requirements on repairs, and DCAM is waiving certain procurement issues to get the emergency repairs done. As we speak, for example, Public Works, Paul Costello is getting some quotes on some of these issues, because we just can't leave sections of seawall open with some of the seawall blocks that have fallen. There's more issues than that, but once you have those penetrations open, it's a heck of a lot easier for the ocean to come in and do more flooding. So we'll keep you posted on all of these things, but I think by Monday we'll have at least an initial appropriation, not a bond issue, an appropriation to help us get through some of the emergency repairs over the next couple of weeks. As you know, it was my intention to come before this body in this early spring to talk about a road plan. Well, that road plan now that we're working on is going to have to be adjusted based on the damage from this weekend, so we'll be making those adjustments as well. As you know, I'm always available by phone. Anybody wants to talk about any particular issue, but there's going to be a lot of public discussion going forward. And again, I can't say enough about how proud I am of our city managers, city employees who really put it on the line, worked their tails off all weekend long. And again, I've probably talked to Dave more than anybody because of the ward we're in, but I appreciate the conversations. I appreciate the words of encouragement, Councilor Liang, at different times. to help us get us through as a community. So we are a community. We're not just a city, we're a community. We'll come together and we'll get this stuff rebuilt, and we'll help people assist getting their lives back together. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or get out of your way.